police discovered a horrifying female corpse inside an abandoned tunnel. Every last bit of flesh had been gnawed clean off the bones, and right beside her were 3 vicious dogs with blood dripping from their jaws. It was pouring rain outside, and a lot of evidence had already been washed away. This obviously made the investigation a whole lot harder. That evening, Sawamura got a message from the medical examiner. Inside the stomach of one of the dogs found at the scene, they discovered a note. On it were the words, "Punishment for treating people like dog food." Based on the police's analysis, the killer had first captured several aggressive dogs, starved them for days, then kidnapped the woman, set the dogs loose, and let her become their meal. Sawamura had a feeling this case was connected to vigilante justice. Someone was playing judge, jury, and executioner, punishing people in their own twisted way. That would explain why they used such a horrific method. Before long, a DNA match gave the police the victim's identity. Her boyfriend's statement revealed that she had abandoned her beloved dog, a pet she'd raised for years, just because her boyfriend was allergic to dog hair. This confirmed exactly what Sawamura had suspected. The killer was punishing people he saw as guilty. They had a direction now, but leads on the actual killer were scarce. For a while, the investigation hit a dead end. But a breakthrough came soon enough. A young couple stumbled upon a body in an abandoned warehouse, a corpse frozen in a kneeling position. Police rushed to the scene. The victim had been strapped to a chair, his body sliced up with countless cuts. On a digital scale next to the corpse sat a pile of carved-off flesh. The weight? Exactly 6 Jin and 5 Lian. A note beside it read, "Bear the pain your mother bore." Sawamura pulled the victim's birth records and discovered something chilling. The weight of the flesh that had been cut away matched his exact birth weight. And this guy, 6 Jin 5 Liang of baby fat, turned out to be a textbook deadbeat. He'd lost his father young and was raised by his mother alone. She worked herself to the bone to bring him up. And what did he do? He sat at home all day leeching off her. His full-time job was playing video games. His side hustle was reading manga. He had zero respect for his mother and screamed at her constantly. One day, he was doing what he always did, sitting at home playing on his computer, when the doorbell rang. He was too lazy to answer. After a few rings, the front door swung open on its own. That scared him half to death. He started screaming for his mom while grabbing 2 knives from the kitchen to feel braver. But when he crept back to the living room, whoever had come in was gone.
まさかドア裏ってことはないよね。
He was then taken to an abandoned factory.
君は有罪。罪人は刑役罪を償わなければならない。
The frogman picked up a saw and began cutting off his flesh, piece by piece, until the scale hit exactly 6 Jin and 5 Lian, his birth weight. The frogman was making him pay back every last ounce his mother had carried. Over dinner that night, Sawamura shared his theory with Nishino. A person's birth weight isn't something just anyone would know. The killer must have done extensive research on each victim to know these intimate details. As he spoke, Sawamura asked a nearby diner to pour him some water. While the man was pouring, Sawamura noticed a wound on his thumb. That gave him an idea. He immediately started gesturing across Nishino's face. If the killer had been sawing flesh off the victim's face, the victim would have fought back with everything he had. In that kind of desperate struggle, he would have bitten his attacker. Could it have been that man just now? But by the time it clicked, the stranger had already paid his bill and left. Sawamura bolted outside, but there was no trace of him anywhere. What Sawamura didn't realize was that this had been his best chance of catching the killer. The investigation soon uncovered something critical. Beyond the fact that both murders took place on rainy days, the 2 victims shared something else in common. They had both served as jurors in the notorious child burial case from 3 years ago. That case had shaken all of Japan. The perpetrator had kidnapped and murdered a little girl, then preserved her body with tree branches, turning her into a grotesque specimen. He then placed her in a public space and put her on display for everyone to see. The sheer brutality of it drew massive public attention. After an extensive manhunt, a man named Joe was arrested as the prime suspect and sentenced to death. He ended up killing himself during the transfer to prison. When Sawamura heard this, panic set in.
お前は何ですから2人は裁判員で。違う、その前だ。幼女樹脂詰め殺人事件の裁判。
His wife had also been a juror on that case. He immediately called her, but she was still furious with him and refused to pick up. Here's why. Sawamura had a habit of letting work consume him at the expense of his family. Just recently, it had been his son's birthday, but the case had been so demanding that Sawamura forgot again. His wife had finally had enough. She'd taken their son and left. While Sawamura was already frantic with worry, things got worse. When police went to check on the people connected to the original case, they discovered that the presiding judge, Koizumi, had already gone missing days ago. He'd been split clean in half. One half was delivered to his wife, the other to his mistress. The shipping label read, "Punishment for dividing your love." This immediately caused a public uproar. A joint task force was assembled to hunt down the killer and protect the remaining jurors. Of the 9 people connected to the original case, 6 had voted for the death penalty. One of them was Sawamura's wife. But the killer was moving faster than the police. By the time officers arrived to protect the remaining jurors, they were already too late. A female judge who was obsessed with her appearance and had scammed people out of money for cosmetic procedures received the punishment of eternal beauty. She'd been frozen into an ice sculpture. Another juror received the punishment of 1,000 needles. Needles filled his mouth and stomach. Of the 6 people from the original case, 5 were now dead. Knowing his wife was next on the list, Sawamura could no longer keep his composure. He rushed to the hospital to find his wife's best friend, Keo. Meanwhile, the department sent 2 officers to Keo's apartment to investigate. But Keo wasn't home. Her boyfriend answered the door and told them she was working at the hospital, they should look for her there. The 2 officers hurried to the hospital and briefed Keo on the situation. After hearing everything, Keo told them where the mother and son were hiding, at her apartment.
だからとんだ食わせ者だな。警察の捜査にはもっと協力的になってもらわなきゃ困る。
ちょっと待ってください。私彼氏なんていません。
Everyone's faces went pale. Then who was the man who'd answered the door? By this point, the killer had already stuffed the mother and child into storage containers, loaded them into a van, and driven off, just seconds before the police came back. As the 2 vehicles passed each other, Sawamura's years of detective instinct kicked in. One glance was all it took, something about the person in that van was off. He sent the 2 officers up to Keo's apartment while he spun around and gave chase. When the officers got upstairs, the place was empty. All they found on the floor was a discarded wig and glasses. On the table sat a note that read, "Punishment for watching from the sidelines." They quickly relayed the information to Sawamura. Knowing the killer was just ahead, Sawamura floored it. The 2 vehicles tore through narrow streets in a high-speed chase straight out of an action movie. But in the end, Sawamura got distracted calling headquarters for backup, and the killer rammed him, flipping his car on its side. Sawamura survived, but he was in no shape to give chase. All he could do was watch helplessly as the killer drove away. The picture was becoming clear now. The killer appeared to be avenging Joe. Just then, the killer suddenly appeared on the other side of a glass window. Sawamura snapped to attention and took off after him. But before he'd gone more than a few steps, he was hit by a car and knocked to the ground. He yelled at Nishino not to worry about him and to go after the killer instead. By the time Sawamura pulled himself up, the killer had vanished. Then Nishino's phone rang. But the voice on the other end wasn't Nishino's.
リサどうだどうだ
そこから右前方、小川ビルの屋上だ。
Come find me. Sawamura rushed to the location, only to find Nishino already in the killer's grasp.
何が目的だこれ殺人か
僕は表現者だ。人を楽しませるアーティストだ。
The killer was exactly who Sawamura had feared, the true perpetrator of the child burial case. He released his grip and let Nishino plummet from the rooftop. Sawamura sprinted forward with everything he had, but he couldn't make it in time. For disobeying orders and conducting an unauthorized investigation, which indirectly led to an officer's death, Sawamura's superiors sent men to take him into custody for disciplinary confinement. But with his wife and son still in the killer's hands, and Nishino's death weighing on him, there was no way Sawamura was going to sit around and do nothing. On the way, he attacked his escorts and broke free. While Sawamura was grabbing a bite to eat, a chef accidentally put lobster in a dish, nearly triggering a customer's allergic reaction. That's when it hit him. He remembered the killer's strange behavior when the sun came out. Could the killer be allergic to sunlight? Sawamura thought about how every crime had been committed in the rain. A bold theory took shape. The killer had a medical condition. He rushed to an internet cafe and searched for answers. Sure enough, there was a real condition, an allergy to ultraviolet light. This only strengthened his theory. He started making the rounds at hospitals, asking about patients with this condition. At a dermatology research clinic, he finally got a lead. At first, the doctor refused to share patient information. But Sawamura didn't have time for red tape. He pulled out his gun.
時間がないんだ
Faced with a weapon, the doctor handed over the patient files. Following the information, Sawamura drove out to a secluded villa in the countryside. He crept inside and searched room by room until he entered one that told him everything. The walls were covered with photos of the victims, including photos of him and his wife. Then the killer ambushed him from behind. After a brutal struggle, the killer drove an iron rod straight through Sawamura's back, then struck him again. Meanwhile, the police traced Sawamura's movements to the internet cafe and pulled up his search history. When Sawamura came to, he was locked inside a sealed room. Next to him were lifelike mannequins of his wife and son. The son's mannequin held a gift box. The wife's held a gun. He opened the gift box. Inside was a massive jigsaw puzzle and a small player. The message was clear, the killer wanted him to complete the puzzle. So he started piecing it together. When Sawamura got hungry, the killer actually cooked meals himself and brought in food and water. But would the killer really be that generous? As the image grew larger, Sawamura realized what the puzzle depicted. It was the family portrait his son had drawn on his birthday. Sawamura kept working on the puzzle. Meanwhile, the police followed the trail to the dermatology clinic. But the female doctor said she'd seen Sawamura, though she had no idea where he'd gone. 20 years ago, a wealthy couple who worked in the art world had been brutally murdered in their home. Their bodies were dismembered, then reassembled into a single corpse. The killer was never found. The couple's child had witnessed the entire thing. The trauma shattered him, and he eventually became the killer they were hunting now. Back in the sealed room, the killer came to deliver food again and finally revealed what drove him.
どうやって殺した？
He told Sawamura that when he'd been watching his wife, he noticed something. She was alive, but dead inside. An empty shell. It was Sawamura himself who had drained every last drop of hope and love from his family through his constant absence and broken promises. These words shattered Sawamura completely. He suddenly remembered his own father had been a cop too. A man who gave everything to the job and nothing to his family. He didn't even make it back for his mother's funeral. Sawamura had resented his father for years because of it. It wasn't until his father sacrificed his life saving a little girl that everything changed. Watching the rescued family express their tearful gratitude, Sawamura finally understood the weight of a police officer's duty and the impossible choices that came with it. He'd vowed to become the same kind of protector his father was. And yet here he was, repeating the exact same mistakes, leaving his wife and son to endure the same loneliness and pain he'd suffered as a child. Drowning in regret, Sawamura threw himself into finishing the puzzle. But one piece in the very center was missing. And that missing piece turned out to be the code to the sealed door. He cracked the code and stepped out. What he saw on the other side made him collapse. Beyond the door was a blood-soaked kitchen. The floor was covered in blood and scattered hair. In that instant, he understood where the food the killer had been feeding him all those days had come from. The thought was absolutely horrifying. A photo of his wife and son was taped to the refrigerator door. A wave of dread washed over him. With trembling hands, Sawamura pulled open the refrigerator. Inside sat two frozen human heads, his wife and his son. Watching Sawamura break down in agony, the killer lurked in the shadows, savoring every second. But it was all a lie. The heads in the fridge were hyper-realistic wax figures. His wife and son were still alive. This entire ordeal had been the killer's way of destroying Sawamura from the inside out, a calculated act of psychological revenge. Consumed by grief and rage, Sawamura grabbed the gun and went after the killer. But the underground lair was a labyrinth, and the killer knew every inch of it. After searching frantically, Sawamura finally cornered him. He ripped off the mask and froze. Underneath was his own wife. Before he could process it, the real killer appeared, holding his son hostage, and presented the ultimate impossible choice: kill your wife, and your son lives. Without hesitation, Sawamura offered his own life in exchange for theirs. In that split second between life and death, the tactical unit stormed the villa and turned the tide. Seeing it was over, the killer opened fire in a desperate last stand. Riddled with bullets, he charged out of the villa. But years of severe UV sensitivity meant the sunlight instantly scorched his skin. His flesh blistered and burned on contact. He collapsed on the spot. The killer was rushed to the hospital, barely clinging to life. While he lay there, his sister slipped into his room and injected poison into his foreline, freeing him from all his suffering for good. Sawamura finally woke up to what truly mattered. He returned to his family, carrying the weight of his duty, protecting the world out there while never again failing the people closest to him.